Hi everyone, welcome back to Renewable Rides. Today, we're bringing you a highlight from our conversation with Josh Bachman, VP of Customer Engagement at Cascade Energy. And it gets straight to a truth most companies don't want to confront. For a lot of organizations, energy lives with one person, or maybe a small handful. And when that person leaves, the program often leaves with them. That's not just a sustainability risk, it's a financial one. In this episode, Josh explains why energy efficiency isn't about LEDs or box checking. It's about eliminating real, measurable waste, often 10% or more, hiding in plain sight inside industrial operations. We talk about how some companies have cut energy intensity by 40%, what it means in real dollars over time, and why CFO-level returns are far more common than most people realize. You'll also hear why the biggest barrier isn't technology or capital. It's people, change management, and leadership buy-in, and why the companies that win treat energy as an ongoing program, not a one-off project. If you care about margins, resilience, or operational excellence, this one's for you. Let's get into it with Josh.
And, for so many of our customers, their energy program exists within one person. And so they've addressed that people challenge to an extent, but there's a resiliency going there because, well, a lot of the people we work with that are focused on energy, they're very successful, and that means there's going to be opportunity for them elsewhere.
Josh, this is not just a decarbonization issue as well. It's a financial issue, and as we've been talking, I've been thinking that within energy efficiency, you've mentioned the term waste several times. And I was thinking that business leaders should be jumping on top of this just as quickly as they would if in their bank account, every day or week or month, a certain percentage, call it 5, 10, maybe as high as 30, 40% of their bank account was just disappearing on a regular basis. Like this is not just an emissions thing, it's a financial thing. Maybe talk a little bit more about the opportunity there.
You bet. I mean, for a typical industrial facility, something on the order of like 10% savings is incredibly realistic. And, for our highest performing customers, they've been able to cut their energy intensity in half. One of our flagship customers is Cisco Food Service. So they're the largest food service customer here in the United States. And they started their energy program journey back in the mid 2000s. And they've ultimately achieved enormous success. They've published a lot of their numbers, so I can share some of them. But I know in one of their recent sustainability reports, they pointed out that their energy intensity was down 40%. And so that is just transformative change for them. When you think about, how many years of free energy does it translate to when you can drive something like a 40% reduction within your operation?
Incredible, and something that CFOs and COOs and certainly CEOs and boards would pay close attention to. Well, Josh, for our listeners that aren't that familiar with the opportunities, both technology but also behavioral based, I think most people, when they hear efficiency, think LEDs, HVAC systems. But within, beyond that, especially within the industrial space, can you give us some tangible examples of these applications and what companies can be doing?
You bet. I mean, so generally speaking, you've got two classes of measures. You've got your low and no cost or operations and maintenance type measures. So that's all about doing the best you can with what you have. And generally that's where we like to start because, quick wins, this is all about change and change management. And you all know how important quick wins are in that. And so generally speaking, we like to focus on those low and no cost measures, helping the customer do the best they can with what they have, because those are things that generally are actionable. And so when we look at that class of measures, it's pretty straightforward stuff. That's the good news. None of this is rocket science. Do you have equipment that isn't being controlled? If it isn't being controlled, what can we readily do to control it? This could be a motor that, maybe we can shut down at certain times a day. Um, there's all sorts of, sensors that you're going to find in an industrial setting on an energy using system that are ultimately going to impact its energy use. Are those sensors in place? Are they functioning as intended? Are they calibrated appropriately? Those are all things that we'd be checking on in our checklist for those low and no cost measures. And then really we're going to look at how things are controlled. And, do you have the ability to cycle a motor? If you have a variable frequency drive on a motor, how is it being controlled? What sort of speed range are we allowing it to operate at? Can we lower that speed range so that we only run it at 90% speed instead of 100%. So often, as you can imagine, it's like 100 little victories on that O&M side. But, again, we can make changes right away. And those are changes that you can see in the meter level. You get that tangible result, and that builds enthusiasm for the capital project opportunities. I mentioned variable frequency drives as one of those capital project opportunities. I mean, the variable frequency drive, that is the workhorse of the energy efficiency market. Throughout my 20 plus year career, we've been doing variable frequency drive projects. I can't believe they're still out there, but they absolutely are. I mentioned control systems. If you don't have a control system, then there's likely an opportunity to put one in there and achieve some real energy cost savings. We do a ton of work in the industrial refrigeration sector, and one of the areas we like to focus on is defrosts of evaporator coils. And so that can be a really energy intensive event, and there's both O&M and capital project opportunities that can help reduce the impact of doing a defrost for a refrigerated warehouse or a grocery distribution center.
So good. I think most people just think of, I've done my LED lights, I've ticked the
Hmm.
box, and it feels like such a false economy, doesn't it? That, for the purposes of not investing a bit of time and energy in trying to address this, you're willing to leave that money on the table. I've never heard of, or I don't know much about variable frequency drives, and I'm sure not
Hmm.
many of our listeners have. Do you want to expand on that, Josh? Because I think refrigeration, HVAC, a lot of that's
Hmm.
fairly common for people, but would love to learn a bit more about that.
You bet, you bet. So a variable frequency drive is, well, when I was a kid, my first bike, uh, it had one gear, right?
Yep.
And whether you're riding up the hill or riding down the hill, that's what you had. And a variable frequency drive is like upgrading from that BMX bike to a 10 speed, or nowadays it'd probably be more like a 21 speed or something like that. That variable frequency drive allows that motor to operate across a range of speeds. And generally speaking, when you're putting in a fan or you're putting in a pump, that piece of equipment is sized for that peak load condition.
Yep.
And as we all know, the majority of the time, that that pump or fan is actually not in that peak load condition, because maybe that's only on the hottest day of the year, or maybe that's on that day of the year when you're manufacturing more product than you typically do. And so what we see is that if you don't have speed control of the motor, it may just be running all out, even though the demand on it is less than normal, or maybe you're cycling that motor on and off. And generally speaking, using speed control to really match supply to demand is going to be the most energy efficient way to run that particular piece of equipment.
Super interesting. Do you think that'll play heavily in the future in the whole demand response side of the equation and bring in flexibility in terms of, being able to control that on the fly to either minimize your impact on the grid, or the grid being able to control your asset within your set bounds? What are you seeing in that kind of smart infrastructure and
You
opportunity?
bet. Yeah, I mean, I think like a VFD is offers an opportunity to shed load, maybe more so than shift load. And so, if we talk about a fan, like, and so in a typical fan application, like say in a refrigerated warehouse on an evaporator fan, there's a cubic relationship between speed and power. And so what that means is if we can run that fan at half speed, the power actually goes down by 80%. So there's this exponential relationship between speed and power. And so any sort of reduction we can get in fan speed can translate into a huge reduction in energy use. And so say we're running our fans at 100% speed because it's the hottest time of day, and the load's at its peak. If we can just, if the grid is saying, hey, we need you to reduce your load, if we can just drop that fan speed by 10%, if we can go down to 90% speed, for that demand response event, you're going to reduce the power on that motor by roughly, let's say, 25%. So huge reduction in power. Yes, you're getting some reduction in capacity, but it's only about 10%. And you can probably ride out that 1 to 2 hour demand response event at that lower speed before bumping back up once that event is over.
Well, it's interesting. I was actually catching up with a couple gentlemen last night, and they were talking about how when they're speaking to businesses, and they're in this
Mhm.
space as well, that they speak to the C levels and the board and say, you know, your building is not the core of your business. Your production of your widget or whatever it is
Mhm.
you do at your facility is your core business.
Mhm.
But in reality, as prices have gone up and the pressures to decarbonize have started to come into place, the building and how that is operating is increasingly becoming a part of their business. Um, Josh, economics really run everything.
Mhm.
How how do these stack up? Thinking back to Gareth, we were speaking to a CFO several weeks ago who said, if you can show me projects that have
Mhm.
25 or 30% plus IRR
Mhm.
or a less than 3 year payback, that's going to go to the top of my list.
Mhm.
Where do these projects sit within those types of financial parameters?
Yeah, I mean, projects within that, say 2 to 3 year payback criteria are readily available. And as I mentioned, there's generally, for so many of our clients, there's utility incentives available or other funding sources that bring that back down further. Again, oftentimes it's not a technology challenge, it's not a financial challenge, it's that people challenge. You know, how do we convince that refrigerated warehouse that it's okay to run your fans, at 90% speed instead of 100% speed for a few hours a day or for maybe the entire year? I mean, they're not in the business to save energy. They've got millions and millions of dollars of product out on that warehouse floor. And that's ultimately their priority, right? So we've got to be able to convince them that they can make this change in a way that's not going to adversely impact their operation. So yeah, again, a lot of the times, I mean, particularly if we're talking about these low and no cost opportunities, it's that people challenge that we're facing. Now, of course, if we're talking capital project opportunities, those are going to have a price tag on them. And again, that ROI can be anywhere from like, say, a 2, 3, 4 year payback. A lot of times that's going to meet our customers' hurdle rate, but there is funding out there that can help bring that number down and bring it to oftentimes under a 1 year payback.
Yeah. And we're not talking about tens, single digit thousands here, are we? We're talking about once you roll all these things up, you're talking about millions of dollars a year potentially,
Hmm.
especially across industrial sites.
Hmm. And then you multiply that by 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, you think about that Cisco story, and starting in 2006, they've got nearly 20 years of massive energy savings under their belt. So it's all about getting that area under the curve over time.
How have you
Josh?
seen? I was just going to say, how have you seen the market change? You've been working with those guys for many
Hmm.
years, but you've been in the industry 20 years now. Uh, what is getting you like super excited right now based on what you've seen develop over the last 20 years, or
Hmm.
what's frustrating you on the flip side?
You bet. You bet. I mean, the most exciting thing is that it it isn't just the financial return now that our clients are interested in. I mean, at the end of the day, that is the single biggest reason that they choose to act on these projects. But of course, there's other pressure that our customers are feeling around energy and decarbonization. That is, just raising awareness, raising visibility around this opportunity to ultimately improve their business. I mean, if you can eliminate energy waste, if you can reduce your energy spend, that makes you a better business. And there's more visibility onto that now than there ever was. As far as my biggest frustration, I mean, what I hear from our customers, what I hear from our clients is that, at the boardroom level, goals are being set. Um, there's press releases that are going out. But the people that we're working with at sort of the mid-level or at the plant floor level, not much has changed in their world. They they have this mandate, but they don't have a budget. They don't necessarily have the authority, and there isn't really anything putting its thumb on the scale, if you will, that allows an energy efficiency project or some other energy project to ultimately outcompete with, like, some of those more core mission critical projects that our customer faces. So that VFD retrofit that we want to do is still competing with, do we fix the roof? And all these other capital investments that our customers need to make. So, we're off to a good start. Things are changing, but it's that disconnect from like the board level to the plant floor level that still needs to be addressed for the majority of our customers, for them to really have a transformation around how they use energy and their carbon footprint.
Expanding upon that a little bit, do you have any advice for the director of operations or the corporate facilities manager, the kind of mid-level folks that you're talking about there? Any advice on things that you've seen have worked to get these going? Because the thing that the question I keep having in my head is like, there's all these benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't everybody doing it or
Mm-hmm.
already done it?
Yeah, I think the advice I would give is, again, think about this as a people challenge as opposed to a technology challenge. And I think the other, right along with that is ultimately, to achieve results like Cisco has, it's not about like you can't think about it as a project. You've got to think about it as a program. Again, it's something that it has no finish line. And, just like, all of our customers have embraced safety and created safety programs within their organization and achieved incredible results in that regard. You've got to take the same sort of look or same sort of approach with energy and with decarbonization. It's not about do a project and just go back to business as usual. You've got to create a program. You've got to assign responsibility. You got to have real and tangible goals. Somebody has to be in charge of it. You have to communicate that across the organization. And for us, what I've seen is the number one indicator of success for our customers is leadership buy-in. So as you know, you either have it, leadership buy-in, you either have it or you don't. And so, for that mid-level person, you've got to both be pushing down within the organization, but of course be managing up and trying to get that leadership buy-in. And typically what that means is you've got to come up with something bold, right? Because if you want to get leadership's attention and you're talking about, well, we can get, 2 to 3% savings, something just kind of on the margins, that's not big enough. That's not bold enough. So go big or go home. That would be my advice.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.